The following contains spoilers for The Last of Us Part 1 and 2. You have been warned. Greetings, fellow mortals. I want to start off by saying that I hold the original Last of Us dear in my heart. I don't view it as the bar for all video games. It isn't even in my top 10. Probably not even my top 20. It is somewhere in my top 50 though. However, I view that as more of a positive than a negative. There are a lot of video games out there, and The Last of Us stands out to me. I remember my first playthrough with great fondness. It's an experience that I loved. Perhaps that's the point of contention for people. The original Last of Us is, in fact, more of an experience than anything else. As a game, it is competent. I wouldn't say that anything about the gameplay blew me away. Crafting, stealth, and gunfights are all solid. I would say that the AI can be exploited a bit too much. For the most part, I would say that trying to sneak past clickers and scrounging around in the darkness were some of the best parts from a gameplay perspective for me. As with every horror or survival game, I ended my playthroughs with more ammo and supplies than I ever really needed to use. Of course, I never played on the hardest of difficulties, so who am I to complain about that? I think that the selling point that divides most people about the original game was the cinematic aspect of it. I would agree that it was trying to be as movie-like as possible. Perhaps that's why it's not on my top tier list of favorite games. It is, in fact, an experience. It's a journey that you get to have with Joel and Ellie. You see their relationship flourish and grow. You grow to love them as people. It's a fantastic story, and seeing the bond between adopted father and daughter grow, I realized something important about myself. I do not ever want to have kids. Because my experience with the final level in The Last of Us is a lot different than most people's. I was a man on a mission. I showed no mercy to anyone. I even killed all of the doctors and nurses to get to Ellie, because they're not hurting my video game daughter. After that, I realized that I probably should never be a parent, because I would burn the world to the ground for my kid if I had to. That might be why I have a different viewpoint on Joel's actions, but that is a video for another day. And that leads us to Last of Us Part 2. It is a game. Yes, it is. The animators and actors worked really hard on it. I appreciate them, because I know that Naughty Dog doesn't, considering that the developers worked more in 1 week than I tend to in 2, and I work pretty long days, don't get me wrong. So that tells you something. Once again, that's a video for another day. For now, let's focus on the remaster, remake, re-release, rehash, re-attempted cash grab that is The Last of Us Part 1. Like I said, I actually like the original Last of Us a lot. I defend it from people who say it's a bad game. It was a good game with a great story. So why do I have a problem with them remastering it for the PS5? Well, it could be that you can already play the original Last of Us remastered on PS5. If you have a PS5 and a base PS Plus account, which everyone that has a PS5 would have, then you get Last of Us Remastered with the PS4 game bundles. It's already available, and I don't think that Sony is going to remove that game from the shop anytime soon. So what's the point in all of this? I get that The Last of Us is beloved by many people, but Naughty Dog isn't going to be changing much. Last of Us Part 2 didn't have many differences from the original game when it came to gameplay. It was almost exactly the same. So what makes this new Part 1 version any different? Maybe a little better gunplay and AI? Maybe. I doubt that it will make that big of a difference. So the only thing left to do is to upgrade the graphics of a game that isn't even a decade old at this point. It's not like the original Last of Us looks all that bad. In fact, I think that it still looks beautiful. The only positives that they're going to accomplish might be making the world look a little bit more realistic, but I find the new lighting to be too dark and the character models to have slipped into the uncanny valley. Something about them just doesn't look right. I find the old faces to look a lot better, but maybe that's just a preference. If you really like the new models, feel free to leave a comment about it. I like to hear why you like it when it seems to me that they're just taking a lot of the models from part 2 and copying them over into this remaster to make it easier. That's not even mentioning the $70 asking price. That's a lot of money for a game that's already been out for almost a decade, especially when you can play the original remastered version for $20 even if you don't have a PS Plus account. Plus, Naughty Dog isn't even keeping the multiplayer in. Apparently that's going to be sold separately later, so this is a version with less in it than it had a decade ago. Not to say that the multiplayer was the best part, but it feels cheap to ask for more money and then take away aspects of the original game. It's not like there aren't PlayStation games that they could use as a remaster. Sly Cooper, Infamous, and Twisted Metal come to mind. They could come back and people would play those games, but we can even stay within Naughty Dog. Jak and Daxter could use some real polish when it comes to graphics. I can imagine it being redone like with Crash Bandicoot and Spyro. Those were good remasters, remakes, whatever they are. Even people that prefer the old versions would have to admit that it would be nice for a new generation of gamers to experience Jak and Daxter. Maybe they could even take the original Uncharted game and give it a tune-up. Lord knows that one is harder to go back to and play after the sequels. It feels like a bit of a mess the last time that I played it. I don't think that Naughty Dog would get much argument if they redid Uncharted with better graphics, gunplay, and climbing. It would feel more appropriate than this, at least. Having Last of Us Part 1 come out almost feels comical. It makes me feel like Sony and Naughty Dog are sweating because of the lack of releases for the PS5. God only knows that the PS5 exclusives are dry right now. There's Returnal, the new Ratchet & Clank, Ghostwire Tokyo, and Horizon Forbidden West. That's not a lot, and I do not believe that God of War Ragnarok is actually coming out this year. I won't believe it until I see people actually playing it. My theory is that they're putting off the actual delay announcement in order to get as many pre-orders as possible before the final quarter of the year. Gotta get those numbers up, right, Sony? So maybe people that actually have a PS5 will pay no matter what, if only to justify having a PS5. As for me, I won't be playing this game. I don't even think that I'll be watching any Let's Plays of it. I've played the original Last of Us 3 times by myself. I have my fill of The Last of Us. I'm sure that a lot of people do too, but I guess I don't know what I would do with the Last of Us franchise anymore. I know that there's a show coming out, but I'm sure that it'll be a lot worse than the game by far, so it's pointless. But what about new games? Part 2 killed Joel off, and there's nothing else that they can do with Ellie at this point. Less than half of the fans care about Abby. It feels like any sequels would tank. They could do a prequel, but it feels like Naughty Dog hates Joel at this point. They could focus on new characters in different parts of the world, but that's a lot more of a risk. Maybe that's why they went with redoing Part 1. Plus, they had to ingrain Part 2 into the franchise somehow. Can't let that one go. All of Naughty Dog's franchises seem to be finished at this point. Jak and Daxter, Uncharted, and The Last of Us have nowhere else to go. It's time for something new. It's time to move on. There are hundreds of ways that the company could go, and they do have Sony money behind them. Going back to the past and to the same well too many times is a recipe for disaster. I am curious about what they're going to be doing going forward. The next few years are going to be very interesting to watch from a gaming and storytelling perspective. Will Naughty Dog overcome and grow, or will they flounder and die? In a lot of ways, that's a lot more of an interesting story than anything else that they can be making right now. Thank you so much for watching. If you like my takes on storytelling, please consider subscribing and liking the video. It would really help me out. Also, remember that I will be self-publishing my novel, Dance of Frozen Death, at the start of 2023. I hope that you will check it out. I appreciate you. Do not despair.